This is the final part to Worksheet 12. We are going to be working on the last question in Worksheet 12. Since this is the most involved, this will just be its own video where we need to create an array of 3 different colored cube prefabs. Allow a player to click on buttons representing the 3 different colors. This should instantiate a cube of that color randomly into the scene. So I went ahead and I set up a new Unity scene. If you had a previous project you're working on for Worksheet 12, it might just be easier to make a new scene and set this up in there. So what I have is I put my 3 buttons named red, green, and blue. I made a new script called cubes and put that on a game object in the scene. And I already went ahead and made my prefabs. So I have like my blue prefab cube, a green prefab cube, and a red prefab cube, so that they just look, like this. And since we're going to instantiate them with buttons, there's really no reason for them to be in the scene. So make sure that you get these set up, get them colored however you want. I'm choosing red, green, blue. I guess you could honestly do whatever color you want, but I'm just going to stick with those. So I'm going to delete these out, and we are going to get started on scripting this. So what we first need to do is we need to think about what information do we need from the scene. And we are going to need our 3 prefabs. We're going to need 3 button click events. So let's hop over to our script, and we are going to set this up here at the top. We'll do our public game object red cube, public game object blue cube, public game object green cube. The other thing that we're going to need is we want to keep these in an array. And it seems kind of silly, 3 objects, but what if you had an entire inventory that you needed to access? Like, think about the size of inventories in like video games where maybe you have like dozens and dozens of items. You wouldn't want to have a bunch of individual variables that you're keeping track of. Instead, you could have an array that holds inventory items that keeps track of your inventory for you, and then that would be a much easier way to keep track of everything. But since we are going to need to access this array in all of the button clicks, we need to make sure that we are making this a class level array. So I'm going to make it private because we don't want to access that in the Unity editor. And this is going to be a game object array. So I'm going to say private game object, square brackets. I'm going to call it like cube array. Set that equal to new game object. And there are going to be 3 elements in there. We do need to do something in the start though. So we've declared our array right here, but we need to actually fill it with our different game objects. So down here in the start, I'm just going to say cube array. The first element is equal to red cube. Cube array. Second element is equal to the green cube. And then the cube array. The third element is equal to the blue cube. Honestly, the order that you put these in, it doesn't matter as long as all 3 are in there in one of the elements. And now that we have this, we can begin the rest of our code. We don't need this update, we just need those button click events. And I want to kind of do this in an interesting sort of way. I want to be able to have one function, a private void, called generate cube. And we're going to send a parameter with it. It's going to be an integer called choice, so that when those button clicks happen, it's just going to call generate cube and give it, 0, 1, or 2. so that we can instantiate all of those cubes just based on whatever is chosen. So we'll come back and code this in a minute. If we want to just do a quick, to make sure that this gets hooked up correctly, we can just do a quick print to the console where we'll just print out the choice that gets sent. But let's make sure that we get all our button click events typed in and hooked up in Unity so that we can just go ahead and focus on our coding. Well, we're getting kind of like the skeleton of our code completed. So public void on red button click. And all that one does is we are going to call generate cube and send it 0, because we are going to say if it has an int of 0, we are meaning to generate a red cube. We then have our public void on green button click. And if that button gets clicked, we're going to generate cube and we're going to send it an integer of 1. And then last, oops, I'm messing with my formatting, public void on blue button click. And if that is called, we're going to call generate cube and send it a 2. Okay, so we have our skeleton in place. Let's go ahead and make sure that our Unity stuff is good too, because I'm going to have to set up some things in here. So let's go, we'll give it a second to populate back over. And we do need to tell it what our red cube, blue cube, and green cube are. And so I'm going to make sure that I'm in my assets prefabs where I prefabbed those already. I'm going to click and drag and drop those in. Making sure I put them in the correct one. Next, excuse me, let me hook up my buttons. So red, get these all hooked up real quick. Oops, I messed that up. If the red button's clicked, we will do the on red button click. The green is clicked. We'll do the on green button click. Sorry, excuse me. And then the blue button. All right, so now if we test it, what should happen is we're just going to get some quick prints to the console letting us know that we did click on those buttons. So red, choice 0, choice 1, and choice 2. So we know that the Unity stuff is good to go. Our buttons are all hooked up, and now we can just focus on generating the correct color cube in a random position inside of Unity. So first things first, we want to make sure that when we are generating a cube, we are putting it at a random X and a random Y. We're not going to worry too much about the Z since, this is X and this is Y. And if you kind of need to figure out a little bit about maybe like what our range should be, we could easily just drop in a cube temporarily. And it looks like X should be about, we'll say maybe like a -6.5 to maybe 7. How about -7 to 7 looks pretty good. And as far as our Y values go, we could get away with, we'll do -3 to 6. Okay, so -7 to 7, -3 to 6. And we can practice doing this as a float. Oh, maybe I should, where's our Y? I think our Y, yeah, I'm sorry, our Z is just going to be 0. We'll practice doing these as floats since vector 3s are floats anyway. So that's going to be pretty easy. So we are just going to say float X is equal to random.range. And I think we said 7.0f to 7.0f. Then we'll have our float y is equal to random.range. And what was that? Was that negative 3f? And I think I said 6f. And then we just need to put together our vector 3, because remember when we instantiate, we have to have a vector 3 for its x, y, and z, what object we're going to instantiate it at, and we have to put in that rotation. So we'll say vector 3 q position is equal to new vector 3, and we'll just say its position is x, comma, y, comma, 0.0f for z, since we're not doing depth, we're just doing horizontal and vertical. Okay, all we need to do now is generate that cube. So we will do instantiate, and the first thing we need to tell it is what object are we going to instantiate? And this is where this choice comes in. Since we have this array, and we know, we already have these kind of ready to go. So if we send it choice 0, we want to be at, cube array 0. And if this is 0, we can just say cube array choice. And no matter what we send it, we know we're going to be generating the correct color cube, because this is either going to be 0, 1, or 2. So if 1 gets sent, we're going to generate a green cube. If 2 gets sent, a blue cube. 0 gets sent, a red cube. So we'll just say instantiate cube array, and then in our square brackets we'll put choice. We then need to say where we're going to what position. That's our random cube position, and that quaternion dot identity for the rotation. And that's it. Like, that is honestly all we have to do. It's fine if they overlap. Honestly, it's going to be really rare that we would ever have two cubes be in the same spot. So this is a great example also of using, sending it information and recycling the code. We don't want to have to, do this multiple times. There's no reason to copy and paste this, 3 times and 3 specific cubes. So we are making a very efficient code by utilizing that array and sending like that into choice along with it. So let's save it. All of my Unity stuff should be hooked up already. So let's hit play and let's see what happens. We got red, green, blue, and we can just keep generating cubes all over the place. And it's kind of fun. And there you have it. That was the whole final one. So if you need to, I'd go back and review this. Definitely try to make sure you understand what we did with this, because this is a really important concept with doing stuff with Unity. And it's going to come back where you're going to have to make arrays of game objects or like arrays of text objects and do stuff and access them.